everyone making do with where you are seated. If you are unaware, this is Fountain House Gallery. We're a nonprofit gallery and studio space working with artists living with mental illness. And we are incredibly privileged to work with a large number of artists who are deeply skilled in their craft. And we were happy to lend some of them for this incredible workshop that transpired over the past couple months. I am going to pass it over. A couple of housekeeping things. If you do need to use the restroom, it's down the stairs to the left. And this will be recorded and distributed afterwards as well. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Connor Gannon. So I'm a member of Fountain House and an artist. I do poetry and music. And I kind of conceived of this workshop in the winter with Dr. Chris Landry over there, who's a psychiatrist at Fountain House. We were inspired by the legacy of Francesc Tosquelles, who Chris will tell you more about. He's the true expert. I kind of learned from him. But Tosquelles was very influential in promoting the art of his patients at a refuge called Saint Alban. And they were kind of a model for outside artists and kind of generated the idea of the outsider art. And he really promoted the artwork of his patients. And so I felt that here at Fountain House, we should emulate that and have a workshop where artists who have serious mental illness and are members of the community could develop their craft together. And I had a couple goals with the workshop. I really wanted to challenge the idea of like the outsider artist and the mentally ill artist as being kind of naive and untutored and unsophisticated and not intellectually developed, I guess. So the title Articulations was a pun based on that idea that we'd be articulating our thoughts and our feelings and our craft and our styles and kind of working it all out together. So we met for 9 weeks in May and June, and each workshop was divided in half. So we had 45 minutes of kind of intellectual discussion where Chris and I would bring in writings by Tosquelles and other art theorists or psychiatrists, and we'd all kind of discuss them together. And then at the end of the second half of the session, we would work on all our art together. So it's primarily visual art, but I was doing music and poetry there. There was a sculptor who did this really cool sculpture in the back. Ellie here made a whole book during the workshop. It's very impressive. So we all different media. And yeah, I think I have more remarks, but we have a Q&A, so we can go to that. So maybe Dr. Chris Landry can introduce himself now also. I'll pass the mic.
Hi, everyone, and thanks, Connor. As Connor said, I'm Dr. Christopher Landry. Most people at Fountain House know me just as Chris or Dr. Chris. And I actually think I might ask Eddie to give his remarks first, but I'll say for just 10 seconds that this workshop was, conceived by a staff and a member at a therapeutic community for people living with, serious mental illness. And it's responding to work that was made by patients at a psychiatric hospital in a very different historical and geographic context. But the immediate context of our community and Saint-Alban Hospital in mid-20th century France have some points of contact that were really the inspiration for us investigating this history and trying to interact with it and learn from it. And that I think, we in this work stand a lot to gain from expanding our horizons, learning about other groups that have done things that are similar in some ways, of course, divergent in others. And the particular occasion was an exhibit at the American Folk Art Museum, and that is what Eddie will speak about.
Check. Okay, we're good. Hi, my name is Eddie Diogardi. Thanks for having me here at Fountain House. I'm very excited to be here. This is sort of a culmination for me of a project I've been working on for the last 2.5 years that eventually became the exhibition, Francesco Tosca's Avant-Garde Psychiatry and the Birth of Art Brut at the American Folk Art Museum, which I state the title in full to kind of give you the expanse of the theme here. And so, yeah, we're working on a project about kind of the history of this category of art brut, which mainly is a term coined by a collector to refer to works that were coming out of a psychiatric hospital in the southern sort of region of France in the post-war era, where a series of pretty unorthodox practices had been implemented by the psychiatrist Francesco Tosca's. And so my involvement in how I got to link up with Fountain House kind of comes about. I had heard of Fountain House for years even, and of the clubhouse model, and found that it was in many ways resonant with what, as a historical anecdote, the Tosca's idea was that we were looking at in the exhibition. Is this mic clear? Is it a little fuzzy? Should I switch?
A little fuzzy, yeah.
Why don't we just switch? All right, two mics now. Here we go. Check, check. Yeah. All right, still good. All right. So the first moment, though, I remember linking up with Fountain House pretty concretely was I was giving a talk about Tosca's and sort of the history and the background at NYU, and Dr. Chris was in attendance, and then he had come up and sort of suggested this collaboration between the Folk Art Museum and Fountain House on the basis of some pretty strong affinities between not only what we were drawing out as like a history and but what Fountain House is doing like on the ground, like here and now. And so that's kind of like the intro of how I got into it. I realized I have certain common friends with other members and those on staff at Fountain House as well. And so then through my colleague Rachel Rosen as well, we kind of then developed this collaboration where Fountain House came by to the Folk Art Museum to see the Tosca's exhibition and then to kind of offer their own perspective on it, because it addresses kind of perspectives of a doctor running a very unorthodox hospital, and at the same time, like this collector who wanted to collect works from a psychiatric hospital. So we get a very rich history of the institution, but I think it's then very good and necessary then that we are able to then advance a perspective of like similar sort of politics of these practices and types of treatment, and to then advance the perspectives of patient artists themselves, or members, as the good terminology is. Anyway, that's sort of a very broad outline. Yeah.
So I will just fill in very briefly before we ask the artist members to talk about their participation in the workshop and their own work. I recognize many of the people here, but some I don't, and I wonder if it might be worth explaining what Fountain House is. I'm getting some nods. Okay. So Fountain House is the first of now over 350 clubhouses worldwide. It was founded in 1948 by former patients from Rockland State Hospital, one of the big state asylums up in Orange County. Many of them had been there upwards of 20 years, and when they got out, there was very little waiting for them. They met as an association of ex-patients. Before they left the hospital, the psychiatrist there had helped them find one another and suggested that they organize a group. But over time, with the help of some benefactors, they managed to get a townhouse in Hell's Kitchen and formed a community to support one another. That community has never been one that was entirely generated by the members of the club, right, as it's called. People who were experienced as patients in the hospital are members here. There have always been staff, and the purpose of a clubhouse is to help people find recovery, that is, to live a personally meaningful and satisfying life. And that when people suffer sort of a breakdown and serious mental illness, that a big part of what has happened is the breakdown of relationships and connectedness. And so community is itself a kind of therapy here. Participation in that collectivity is what we do and why we do it. And so if you have a community, then there's work that needs to be done to make it a thing, make it more than just bare walls. So you might imagine the first thing, if you gather people together, what they might want to do together is eat lunch. And so one of the first activities of a clubhouse is a culinary unit, one that not only prepares food, but also orders ingredients, plans menus, cooks and serves the meal, surveys people about what they like and don't like. As the community grows, other needs may develop. There might be enough things happening there that you want a bulletin about what's going on, and then eventually a newspaper. And so, of course, we have that. Fountain House is an unusually big clubhouse. There are 1,400 active members currently, but all clubhouses have in common this idea that what happens there is work that makes community happen. At Saint-Alban Hospital, although it was still in a hospital context, it was during the Second World War that this all began, and so the possibility of moving outside the hospital wasn't realistic for contingent historical reasons that had the government having a really attitude towards people with mental illness. They nevertheless created a place of liberation within the hospital and began by knocking down the walls, by abolishing restraint and confinement of patients, opening up relations, sort of economic and social, with the local town, and involving patients and staff together in the work of running the hospital. Everything from planning social activities to the cooking and cleaning to their own patient-run newspaper. And I had been interested in this history and read about it, and in a chance conversation with Connor, he really ran with it, learning about this exhibit at the American Folk Art Museum, proposed one day that we do our own project responding to this history and seeing what we could take and recontextualize and gain from, but sometimes also critique or criticize. And so that has been the process here. I will say that artwork is its own kind of work, right? The things that make life beautiful, that comment on it, that reflect or transform or sublimate are just as much part of human communities as the work of cleaning or cooking or conversing or writing a newspaper. And so I see what happens here as in no way distinct from the rest of the clubhouse work. And I think that Tosquea's and many people here at Fountain House also share that perspective. So I'll conclude with that and then hand things off to our members. Would you like to go?
Hi everybody, I'm Becky Eastland. I'm an artist, member of Fountain House. I've been a member since 2009. I am coming up on 15 years, and I have, is this making a lot of noise?
They may vote at mics.
Hello? That's better. I think that's a little bit better. I think it's just the speakers loose, guys. So I have a bachelor's of fine arts. I have a master's of social work. I'm hoping to get a different master's because that's how you social work burns you out. But I am an artist who took a very critical look at kind of the workshop and what is kind of done. I think that many times it's professionals who kind of take credit for opening the door, but who is the door imposed by? And I think that is a very hard part where we have, a gentleman from this asylum who unlocked the doors in a way. He let the patients interact with community members. He had fairs outside. He gave them implements that were not allowed before, a paintbrush. Oh, you could poke somebody's eye out with that, but we'll give you one for now. But then what happens when the one person who unlocks the door and lets it open just a little bit leaves? Well, the door shuts again. And so every one of these communities is very precarious. It's very special. It's something that needs to be highly protected and passed on to the next generation, or it slips back. The doors close. The keys get lost. And I think a lot about that with Fountain House and, our direction, our look towards globally kind of forming more clubhouses to not lose the keys. In my own work, which is right here, what I put up was 3 pieces that really had a lot to do with the reason I have this wristband on my arm right now. I just came from Sloan Kettering Hospital, Cancer Hospital. I am an ovarian cancer survivor. And today my oncologist said that I can go down to scans every 6 months instead of every 3 months. But in that process, just a year before I found out I had ovarian cancer and had to lose my parts of me that I held dear as a woman, I had a miscarriage with my husband. And it tore me up. And unfortunately, many of us deal with very difficult family members. And my mother's decision was to make my life hell and then tell me that I never thought I was going to have grandchildren anyway. My heart broke. And it brought up a poem by this wonderful poet, Shira Erlickson, which is here, about what it's like to look at advertisements for getting eggs from a woman, and they all say no one with mental health issues, as if we should be discarded even from this most precious thing to do in life. And for me, this Tuscayas, Fountain House, all of these other communities, it's just the beginning of the door opening. It's just a start. And how do we all give each other the keys? How do we go to find a locksmith who will make us all copies? And we can open those doors. And we can decide for ourselves who is let in and who is pushed out. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Vermilion, and I'm amazed to see so many faces from the house, but also from outside the house. This is an honor for us that you came here. Well, like Betty said, I was suspicious because I was not sure if we're gonna be. I mean, here is Chris, a psychiatrist, and Connor is a Princeton gentleman. So I don't know if he's working on a thesis of sorts, and we are, like Rachel said, in a fishbowl. We'll be just looked at, and so I didn't know how to go about it, but I showed up, and it was great for me. It was great to see so many artists talking, talking on equal footing with Chris and with Connor. It was great when we went to the museum. I prepared myself. I read all I could, and at the museum to meet Eddie, he was so respectful, and that I count professionally very much in his eyes, and all of us. That was very rewarding. What tugged at my heart was that I've read about, you pronounce it, Eddie, for me, the asylum, that actually what happened there, it was during the war, and French people decided that they're not going to feed mentally ill people, confined mentally ill people, so 45,000 patients died from hunger. And this brilliant guy, he opened the asylum doors also to give the patients a chance to survive. So they went in the villages around and they looked for work, and they got here a potato, there a piece of bread, and they survived. That was moving to me because Fountain House is similar, we come from wherever, and then we get jobs, those who can, others just turn into artists. I can't keep a job for the life of me. But it's the same, they battered down the walls between the psychiatrists and the patients, between the asylum and the village. And it's the same in Fountain House. If you're gonna get to visit, then please come to visit. It's a wonderful building and a wonderful heritage. You'll see that everywhere you can walk. It says there clearly at the, what is Elliot? Camille is executive director. Elliot, anyway, Elliot is Fountain House for us. He's been with us forever. He's one of the directors. You'll see on his door, don't knock, just barge in. And that's what we do all over the place, So, but in terms of, I should talk about me, what I did with my artwork. Yeah. I call that a ledger. So it's a sketchbook. It has, I counted, it's on that, it has 62 pages. I numbered them. And I didn't know what I'm gonna do because, as you see, Betty, she's a professional artist. She's a marvelous artist. And so is Chris, and so is WX, and so many, Daniel, everybody was proficient. But me, I don't do drawing, I don't do painting, I make installations, mosaic art, I perform, and so I was at a loss, to, carve a corner for myself. So I just started to get the materials for collages, but then I realized that I don't do collage work actually. I don't know how to cut them so that they fit in an interesting way. I just put them there, rectangular after rectangular. And then I started to survey the presumable surveillance. I started to listen to my fellow artists and write down my thoughts about what was said, write down about how I reverberated to the writing. I also surveyed myself. I make mosaic arts. And so I was told to go and visit Julian Schnabel's exhibition, who is making artwork out of smashed plates. And so I wrote my review there and I put it in the ledger. So it accumulated a lot of writing, a lot of personal anguished writing, a lot of funny writing, all kinds. And then I started to draw. And I know I'm not good at drawing, but somehow my doodles turned into, it tied up the whole thing somehow. Because if you do me the honor to look through it, you'll see that they look both vegetal like unfurling tendrils and flowers of sorts and seeds. But at the same time, they also look like the neurons, like the synapses, like the dendrites. And you'll see blank spaces in there where I hope to populate later on. To me, it was an amazing experience. It was an amazing experience. I took it outside the workshop, and I was so possessive of it. It took me a while to give it to the curators, to look through it, and even now I want it back. So I priced it at $999, so then nobody buys it. And maybe you buy it. What am I gonna do then? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Double X, and I found out about this articulations from social practitioner, and she came up to me with the flyer one day, and she was like, "Yeah, I saw this, and they're having this workshop. Maybe it's something you want to check out." And it was like the next day, so I had to call for my trip really quick to get accessorized and to book a trip, and then I went there, and I really wasn't sure at first what it was really about, and but then I started learning about the history of what was going on there in France and how it correlates with what's happening here and now in the present. I thought was very fascinating. And during all the workshops, I opened up a note on my phone, and there were different words that would catch my attention from either what we got in the emails about stuff to read, or what was discussed in the workshop, and I started drawing those words on the paper. And by the end, I had a whole bunch of words that were associated with what I had picked up on the workshop. And I spent my work is on the back on the left there. I used it for the flyer actually, which I'm very grateful. I spent a long time on the background. Trying to get a lot of movement in the back. And the symbols have different meanings to them. And it's part of my artwork that I've made up. But I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot.
Hi, my name is Christy Hart, and I'm a fairly new member at Fountain House, February of this year. And I came to the group because let me put it this way. My family was a cocktail of dysfunction, and I was the olive on the stick. So my primary art was always writing, and that was the one place where my identity was my own and sacred. So writing kept me afloat, saved my life. It was my community. Other artists, writers were my community. And I have two pieces in the back, the very, very tiny works. It's a colored pencil, and it's the one place where my hyper focus and love of detail has value, as opposed to being annoying or obstructive in my own life. So one of the reasons I came to the group was the writers and artists that I gravitated toward had very difficult mental health lives. And many of them would be hospitalized and come out, and their art just had something so magical about it. And it made me ask the question decades ago, where does art come from? And how do we use that space, right, that we go into? And so I'd like to read a poem that is all about that. And the title, I mean, with the utmost respect. The edge of crazy. That moat around your bed where strangers hover and talk. That spot on the wall where your dead son leans and cries. That hole in your mind where words are laid to make the journey in and back. There we can speak to the monsters in our dreams. From there, we bring back pictures we can't explain. Like worry stones, we pocket the gifts of the crazy and sing to ourselves the song of the other side. We go there when there is no place in the world to go, and we come back when there is no more reason to stay. Sometimes we forget the words one by one by one, until all we can do is grin or frown. Sometimes demons ride out on our shoulders, waiting for the dark, waiting for us to see them and snap. But we, who are not frightened, embrace them, reach for the light.
What are we doing now?
Okay, so now that we've introduced ourselves and the workshop, we want to introduce you more to Tusquets and his legacy and do a little almost simulation of what we did during our workshop. So all of us, there's one extra week of our reading. We found this interview that was just recently translated of Tusquets and his writing, or it's an oral interview he did that's transcribed. And we all read it and picked out a couple passages that we liked, and so we thought we would discuss them for about 20 minutes, and after that we'll transition to a Q&A. If you guys want to comment on the passage, that'd be very welcome. Comment on the artwork you're seeing here, anything we said. We'll close with the Q&A. So let me find, one second. The printer just broke today, so we were going to have this printed out, but now we have it on my phone. I got it. Yeah, so this is an interview. This is about 4 different quotes from this interview with Tusquets. And we picked them because we felt that it really showed how his model was something that we emulated and that we did in our workshop. So yeah, we can do that. So we'll all read a segment of it. So the first quote: "Man is the type that goes from one space to another. He cannot always stay in the same place. That is to say, man is always a pilgrim, the type that is always going elsewhere. The important thing is the trajectory." So now Betty can read the next one.
The club was a place where people leaving the various hospital wards could meet up and establish relations with the unfamiliar, the unusual, and at times the surprising. From that moment on, their statements and actions would not be fixed by the internal life of their ward. This is why there must be freedom to roam, to go from one place to the other. Without this wandering, we cannot speak of the rights of man. The first right of man is the right to wander.
The club was a place where wanderers could meet, a place for the practice and theorizing of wandering. We must first separate ourselves from somewhere in order to go elsewhere, differentiate ourselves in order to meet others, elements, or things. The most important site of collective psychotherapy in the hospital was the publication of the newspaper.
I don't have my glasses.
I'll take the next one. No problem. I got it here. When we walk through the world, what counts is not your head, but your feet. You must know where to put your feet. They are the great readers of the map of the world, of geography. It's not on your head that you walk. The feet are the site of what becomes dynamic energy. That's why mothers tickle the feet first. It's about standing up, distributing the energy, which lets you go somewhere. But it is with the feet that you go, not the head. There's one last, if you'd like.
Part of my job has consisted of converting people into what they really are, beyond their appearance, beyond what they believe they are, and their ideal self.
Ta-da.
So now we can just pass this mic back and forth, and we'll be discussing this passage. So I guess the part that stood out to me, reason why I wanted to use it is, this was kind of an intellectual discussion-based workshop, but it was also a craft-based workshop where our practice was as much a way for us to think together as thinking and discussing was. And so the idea of thinking with your feet, I felt like all of us in this workshop were thinking with our hands. And what you see is an articulation of our individual worldviews or our struggles or our triumphs as much as what we said in the workshop. And so just this idea that creation is really the culmination of your thinking versus just what comes out of your mouth, and that these are more lasting legacy of our thinking than even what we say. So there's a lot to unpack. If anyone else wants to, we can pass it back and forth.
Hi, I wrote a little something about the passages. I totally agree about the art being more than just verbal expression. It goes far beyond that. And the one that really stuck out for me was that we are wanderers and we have to separate ourselves from somewhere in order to go elsewhere, and differentiate ourselves, but also to have collective space. And I think that means something. We're often told that we have to be fully integrated to really be humans, and I don't really want that, guys. So I want to be able to come in and out of the spaces that I hold dear. So this is what I wrote in response. It is collective space and the freedom to be authentic, and to fulfill the need to be needed, and to share and anoint such with visual art, which is the adornment of physical space, music, the decoration of time, storytelling, the sharing of ourselves, dance, the spirit of the body and soul, that provides a conduit for true belonging in a society that shuns and dishonors those that do not conform to austerity's aims. To be valued for who we are versus what we could be. To celebrate one another, to build collectively. Not for power, not for gain over others. This is the true lifeblood of human beings who belong to this beautiful planet.
The passage that I related to the most was the last one. Part of my job has consisted of converting people into what they really are, beyond their appearance, beyond what they believe they are, and their ideal self. And Fountain House gives us the opportunity to be ourselves. It creates a level, welcoming environment, and we can go there and discover who we are, and be able to express that through art and community. And community is so transformative, really. And to be able to go someplace and be yourself, whatever that is. If you're having a difficult day, if you're really in crisis, you can come to Fountain House and there will be people to be there with you, even just to sit with you. So it's everyone's job at Fountain House not to, as the quote says, it's not our job to convert people into who they are. It's our role to enable people to become who they are and who they wish they could always have been and really want to be.
I'll say for my part that I am not, or until this workshop, I have not been a visual artist, and I felt very out of my element here. You know, there are some people with there were some members with permanent artist residencies at our studio. There are people who have had a lot of experience and have taken great joy in making art. I've made a little bit of music in my time, but if I have an art, it's in the art of being a psychiatrist and a therapist. And so I thought it was important for me to be constantly out of the place that was comfortable for me, to be willing to wander. And the members who participated in this workshop gave me the opportunity to do that, right? That they gave me the acceptance that this community had in turn given them. And this became a space for my creative discovery as much as anyone else's. Now, of course, if it were only my creative discovery, then we wouldn't really have succeeded in doing anything. But I think the point is that everyone who participates in this needs to be given room to wander. And my own, neurotic hang-up about inadequacy as a visual artist is just as much a part of that as well.
So I just wanted to thank everyone who was part of the workshop. And I've been part of Fountain House for a long time, since 2016. But sometimes it's hard for me to connect and talk to people. But I was able to talk to some people in the workshop, and I was able to learn a lot about the history of clubhouses, and very grateful for Tusqueas for having that insight.
It stayed with me the ode to the feet. I believe I caught up with my life because of my dog, who forces me to walk her every day. And the psychiatrist said, a dog is much better than the cat that you love so much, because that cat doesn't get out of your house. And so, indeed, walking changes your mind, and fortifies you and relaxes you. And somehow that transfers to the hands, that As I said, I'm no painter. To me, it really felt that it's between my hands, my fingers, and blessed acrylic paint marker, because I'm no good with brushes. But I could control. I wanted finesse. I wanted slim lines. And I painted as I went about it. I didn't do figurative painting. I kind of tried to disguise a vagina. I have a piece about hairy vaginas. And I tried to venture, into realism, but it turned into like a fruit with a lot of seeds. So what I'm saying is that there is, I don't know if intelligence or whatever, it is a knowledge how to do things in your hands, in your body. I just read that the octopus can't tell the colors. Yet, its body, I mean his body, her body, their body, it mimics perfectly the environment, the colors. So the body somehow knows more than the eye and the brain. And I guess I'm catching up with myself in that. But I tell you, I call them modestly, well, fake modestly, doodles. I'm really proud of them. But when I noticed I was chatting either with Connor or with Chris, and we were discussing something. No, I think it was Chris. And my hand got a freedom that before I didn't have it. And I made the drawing, the entire page, whereas before I would just confine myself in corners. So that's all the wisdom I can drag out of myself right now.
That's it. I mean, that was quite a lot. But no, I'm so glad that you spoke just before me too, because I too am most provoked by this foot thing in the Tusque's speech. But also, this is if you don't mind, this is as good a time as any to mention that you have a upcoming show on cats, dogs, and other family revelations. I think I love the phrase too. But it's also, also animals also. Too many cards. But yeah, I think the animal is like a good figure here, and like there's in a non-pejorative sense, I think Tusque's brings about a sort of like recognition of maybe human animality in this, a playful way. How are we doing that sound? We're doing a little. I'm just gonna make a quick comment. Just some errant thoughts I had while everybody was speaking and talking about their own work, which I find inspiring and be cool. Because maybe this is not the idea. Maybe I'm screwing up, doing it wrong, but it's like kind of comes from the same word as wandering anyway in history. So I'm gonna do it anyway. So, but I was just thinking, about this feet thing in Tusque's, and honestly, as many times as I've heard it working on an exhibition about the guy in the last few years, my spontaneous reaction every time is like, wait, is that a thing? Like, do moms tickle feet first? Like, did I not know this? And then, it reminded me in a very direct way of what Betty was saying, then talking about this perspective of like, or non-recognition of maternal perspective that you were kind of combating against in your work and kind of insisting on this.
This difference in your perspective. I think it was like, it's very interesting how okay.
I'll do it for the Zoomers of all types. So, yeah, I was reminded by this quote about the mothers and the feet, about something that Betty was attesting to in her work, about how this perspective had been kind of wiped out of after your own experiences with medical and personal anecdotes, and how this is kind of embodied in the paintings that are behind me also. And likewise with Double X's work, how we had sent, all these emails and stuff about Tosque's exhibition, all this like French history, and how I really get like a radical sense of like a perspective from the way you kind of like take the words and then like plotted them all along with the symbols into your own symbolic language in this way. So it kind of emphasizes like a shifting of perspectives, or like that there are other perspectives, namely. And then also kind of Ella, what you were saying as well about you're like, I'm not a collagist, and you also said I painted it as I could or as I wanted to, but you nonetheless did it anyway. And then Christy was talking about sort of the impossibility of like precision, or like the curse of like having to do this, and I related to that a lot also. And I also like make some music and stuff is my preferred medium, and I often find myself banging my head against the wall of like the impossibility of this precision and trying to make something of it. But then you have moments where like when listening to Connor's sound work, where I was like genuinely inspired, and then you get sort of revitalized by working with others in exchanges like this, where you're like, oh, some ideas I hear there, maybe I can draw this out. So all in all, I think it's a good plea for bringing it all together and just letting it kind of against austerity, like you were saying, like just like the more the merrier in this sense. What do you all think? We can multiply it more. So anyway, sort of a
Turned it off on me. This one seems to be working fine. I really have to say I hate these things now in this context, because our conversations were always so free flowing in the workshop, and here we are passing this object around or talk. I also wanted to comment one this time and a passage about converting you to yourself. I felt like that was really profound, and it reminded me of when I had the idea for this workshop. I went to Dr. Landry and the gallery, and there was a little bit because people were obviously therapy. And I was like, well, no, I actually always resented art therapy and didn't like it. And I guess what I didn't want to do was this idea that art is like a band-aid on a wound, where it's like you have some kind of damage to yourself, and the art is just covering it up and healing it, and then leaving you maybe scarred or just sort of back to normal. And I felt like really art should be about developing yourself and finding new capacities in yourself. And so this idea of this is kind of about converting you to your true self. I thought really expressed that idea that art is a way of advancing yourself and finding new capacities and new forms of reason and new ways of developing, rather than just covering up something that is a damage or something that you want to forget about. So I hope that we were able to achieve something beyond art therapy in this workshop. Now we can pass it around a little more, or we can do a Q&A. I think we're about a Q&A time, unless anyone has any thoughts. Okay, so yeah, I guess not so great. If you have questions for any of us about the workshop as a whole, or about the individual artists, about the work, if you've had a chance to see it or listen to it or watch it, like the video, you can ask any of us questions. Ask the people who hosted the workshop about the workshop in general. Really whatever, just try to keep them a little brief if you can. We've got like a half hour left, so people can't talk for 10 minutes in their question. So I guess I will field the questions. I'll pass the microphone to anybody who has any. So whoever wants, just raise your hand. There you go.
Hey, thank you so much. I'll try to keep this question simple. First off, very moved by everybody's response here in the panel, how art has changed your lives for the better, how it has really like brought this beautiful perspective on the world that otherwise would not have been. My kind of question here is, what is it about like the background that you all are coming from, like psychiatry is like, this institution that, how do I put this, obscures the necessity of art in being human? Like what are the impediments here that like make it difficult for others to see, well, why why do patients need to have artistic expression? Why is that necessary?
So I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it's actually a frequent thing. I think most patients in hospitals are not provided any artistic material or any way to actually artistically express themselves at all. I actually think that art is just the most basic human thing we are. If you take a look at Neanderthals 500,000 years ago, they were making art that was spectacular. It's human in nature. What is inhuman is the commodification of everything, which makes art for most people impossible. That is what is inhuman. I think that people who are consistently pushed out of society have to innately become, or they innately are forced to become, brave enough to say F you to that kind of thing, because we don't have any other choices. I make art because I have things that move through me. Everyone should be making art because they have things that move through them. Everyone should be touching something, making music, dancing, doing something, right? Why are we not all doing that when every culture everywhere has been drumming and making and crocheting and building and doing? How many of us still do anything with our hands except cook food or change babies or work, right? And yes, it is an art, but it's one that's still left to us as a whole. Now, you shouldn't be an artist because you're not going to be able to feed your family. You shouldn't be an artist because there's more economic pursuits, all of this stuff. I think that is the illness. Not that patients have to make art, that some patients are afforded the ability to make art. Any other questions, guys?
Here, maybe you could pass the mic to in the back there.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys because I also took a couple of your classes, but we are not necessarily outside artists. We're trained artists. And also, in reference to that, when I went to FIT and got my degree, there were a lot of artists that were talented. They also needed help from the Office of Disability. So anything that can help us is a plus for everyone, So thank you so much.
Thank you. We got a question. Let me get that mic.
I wanted to see if you could briefly say what the workshop was about, consisted of.
Sure, yeah. So we met for 9 weeks. We split it into 2 halves of 45 minutes. In the first half, we would discuss Tisquez's philosophy and practices, or art theory in general. So we read a couple of different theorists. We had a session about psychiatrists who kind of coined the concept of art brute, and we all discussed that together. And then at the second half of the session, we would create art together, either collaboratively or individually, and comment on each other's art, and kind of see what we were doing and all work together in that. And it was all in response to the Folk Art Museum's exhibition, which is still up right now, and just trying to emulate the model of what Tisquez was able to achieve in St. Alban here at Fountain House. Sure. We got a question here on the...
You mentioned feeling like this was not art therapy, but also at the very beginning, someone spoke about how artwork is really, it can be a form of working through personal mental health and can be a really large outlet. And multiple people have talked about how they've grown or have been able to delve deeper into issues that they've dealt with. And I wonder what makes this different for you than art therapy, if at all, or if it's just a different sect.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that first. If anyone else wants to jump in, they can. I guess for me, really, it was the contrast between whether therapy is just repairing or whether it's developing, and the idea that there's sort of a stigma that what you produce in art therapy is like might be good for you, but it's not really valuable to anybody else. Like there might be masterworks that were created in the therapeutic context, but it feels like it's often truly in the hospital context is literally thrown out at the end of the day, and that's it. I don't mean to put too much shade in art therapy, but I wanted it to be freed of that stigma and that sense of triviality and expendability, and be something more lasting. So we have this exhibition here. Some of the artworks have sold. Hopefully they all sell soon. And these things are going to be in someone's home. It's more of a culmination of your development versus just repairing damage. It's not a broken bone. It's a new limb, really. So that's my piece. If anyone else wants to say something.
I can say something from the point of view of a social worker kind of in the field. I was thinking about getting an art therapy degree, but it's a very narrow field. And it's very admired in the diagnostical, medicalized field. And it's really about art being a vehicle to diagnose something related to the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, which is frowned upon by most communities that are actually formed by people with mental health issues. There are a lot of really good alternatives to that book out there. I'm not going to get into all that, but what happens is you do art therapy, and then your art is actually protected under HIPAA, which means that you can't share your friend's art in that group online, because God forbid somebody find out that person might be a patient of somebody, then they're violating something. And so your art becomes this bizarre, commodified, overly commodified, held onto thing that you have to hide, right? It becomes the opposite of what even art is really about, which is like getting something out of something through all of your experiences you've had as a human and all of the humans who've existed before you, and all the nature that's around you and things that are going on. It's filtered through your experience and out. And what art therapy really does is say that is actually about something wrong with your psyche that we have to fix, and then once it's fixed, you don't really have control over that. It's not really yours, right? So for me, art therapy, I don't agree with it. I didn't go for a degree in it, and I don't appreciate it because it's really narrowed. Again, who gets to be an artist? And every hospital that also has art therapy, then they can't really even show that work unless they get everyone to sign agreements and do all this stuff. It's just, it takes, it's too much. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to this because I think it's a great series of points that you made, Betty. And also kind of related back to the first question that was asked about, the question was formulated in a nice way to, what about is there this necessity of art for, say, human experience? What's interesting about the history, at least as far as I know, of art therapy and its antecedents is that really there was always in what was called, say, psychopathological art, which was taking art as a series of diagnostic tools, precisely as you had said, and then led often into a fascist, literally fascist politics in Europe that okay, if you paint this way, it relates to, schizophrenia, which then of course is related to socio-political categories and so on. There was this positing of an essential relation of a certain state of mind and then the art. What's interesting as a counterpoint about Tosquet is that he was never really concerned with the status of what people who were patients at St. Bobak were producing as artworks. He was just kind of I don't know, it's just part of the general product of the hospital. And it kind of lets art people who happen to also like be patients in some capacity stand on its own as art in itself, like that there's no like non-essential relation to like the, I don't know, purported sanity or not, or these categories or whatever. So it's very interesting. It kind of lets things stand on their own then, and lets like art stand for itself in a certain sense. There's a certain way of doing that, whereas there's a long history of trying to pigeonhole art based on some relation to the imagined state of the person producing it or something like this. So, yeah. Somebody else want to say? Yeah.
Where's the second microphone right now? Yeah, thanks.
I'm one of the artists that's on the group, Kevin Hobbs and the other one. And it was great to do it for the last couple of weeks. And it shows that, you know, we got to break that stigma of everything that has to do with art. Why not? Why not break everything that goes on with it? Why not? Anybody can do it. You know, stop caring about what people think. Just put it on paper. Well, write it down. Do whatever you want. You know, why not? We got to stop caring about what people think. Just put it on paper. Put anything on, you know. Just stop caring and just put it, you know. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Thank you. We got another question over here. Yeah, can you pass it for me? Okay, well, Zoom would appreciate it, but yeah.
Hi, thanks for having us. I'm just interested if you could describe some of the feelings you have while you're creating art, and kind of what's going through your head, and what that's about.
Yeah, again, because I'm holding the mic, I'll answer first if anyone else wants to join in. That reminds me of one of our sessions that I was particularly passionate about and fascinated by. We were discussing this question, and I was saying how personally when I'm working on music, I feel this total self-abnegation where I'm not even present. It's like I'm just this empty vessel for this thing flowing through me. But then what I find so interesting about art is I then go listen to a musician or go see a painting, and I think I'm seeing that person who might be dead now, but I see the manifestation of them right before me, and I understand exactly who they were. And so this idea that you are emptying yourself out and reinvesting yourself into another object or a sound file or whatever it is something I find most interesting about art. And it's, for me, that really is a feeling that I'm losing myself in order to rediscover myself. That's what I find most interesting about it. Anyone else can comment?
Well, it varies. It varies. It's not the same experience. I drift, you know, from performance to writing to visual arts, but particularly in this situation where, as I said, I chose some images, some magazine clips or whatever, prestigious art at time, I would feel both. I would love it. I would love the pieces that I chose, but I would also feel intimidated, you know, because, as I said, I'm no painter. And then fellow artists kept on telling me, make it your own, make it your own. And so then I said, okay, I'm gonna have a conversation with the pieces of collage, you know. I'm gonna have a conversation, and I would zoom in, and I would think how I connect with that particular piece, and then I would make it my own. Like, for example, I have a page in which it started with an image of an artist that reminded me of Ricky Martin, but he's not Ricky Martin, and so I wrote on him, "This is not Ricky Martin." And then I don't know. 3 weeks after that, I had 2 large pages, because you see, it's large. I don't know, it's 18 by 16, whatever it is. I have pictures of all kinds of gentlemen from all kinds of culture, and on each of them he says, "This is not Ricky Martin." No. So I guess I connected through silliness. I don't know, but it feels like through. But with others, there was an Australian painter, and I tried to do my kind of crocodiles. He was making crocodiles, and I made my crocodiles. Another one had the whole page was with curlicues, like they had bears with curls, and there was a sheep with curls. So then I made my own curlicues. But I can be more complicated. But I'm tired now.
Can you hand me my blue and black backpack from the closet, and I'll tell you what the art feels like. That one. So I do a lot of hand dyeing of fabrics. I forage in the woods by my house for all sorts of materials. And I dye with them, and I make things. And so I have a performance piece where I put something over my head and body, and I perform in it. And the last one that I made is kind of orange. I really didn't like the color. And so I got this piece of cloth from one of our adventures, our collective adventures, where we went to Fab Scrap and we sorted through fabric, and they gave us 5 pounds of fabric for free for sorting for hours through their fabric, which was really fun, actually. And so I got this piece home, and I created some dyes and some experiments with a variety of things I was growing in my backyard, and some rust and some other things, and I felt horrible about it. I mean, you just feel so anxious. You have no idea how anything is ever going to turn out, or what's going to happen, or what the heck am I doing, or what am I going to do with this thing? I have no idea. I'm just going to leave it in the backyard because you know what? I don't want to look at it, and I don't want to see it, and I don't care, and it's never going to turn out right, and I'm going to just be horrible forever, and no one will ever love me. So here's that. So I left it out there. And I said, okay, I was thinking about possibly performing this story this evening that I have, but I don't think I'll have time. But this is now an outfit. This is now to perform that very piece, and it's actually perfect. It's stained in the right places. It's a little bit yellow. It looks like I've left it out in the backyard for weeks, which has happened, and it's going to fit. So this piece happens to be, can you hold this, Christy? It happens to be one cloth that you can actually just climb into. And it's absolutely perfectly and utterly perfect for the piece. And so, if you can get the microphone. I used to have this dream. Each night in my childhood bedroom, I would climb up this tree that grew from the floor and reached its branches up to the ceiling. I would climb with my blanket and my pillow each night, and there I would sleep. But one night, something happened. I woke up in the middle of the night and my pillowcase was missing. I couldn't find it anywhere. I went to my mother the next morning and I said, my pillowcase is missing. And she said, well, what did you do with it? And I said, I don't know, it's just missing. So I took another one from the closet. And the next night, I awoke to no pillowcase. Where is it? My mother said. I don't know. And the next night, and the next night, until one night I woke up and I heard rustling at the foot of the tree, and I looked down and I saw my pillowcases dancing around the tree. They were full, as if somebody were inside of them, and they danced and they moved. And then my mother said, where are your pillowcases? I don't know. But they danced. They danced like my grandparents at their parties, with the wine and the beer around the campfire. They danced in revelry. Where are your pillowcases? Each night they danced, until one night I awoke and they marched. They marched, and I tried to hide. All I had was my blanket. I didn't want them to know I was awake. Where are your pillowcases? The one in the front, the leader, marched with his pitchfork. The others marched behind him. And each night they came, and each night they marched. I had this dream for years, until the day I knew what it meant. Then I had this dream for years, no more.
Well, there's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Buddy. That was so moving. For me, when I write poetry, and in my early years, it was all about a quest to understand the world around me, or a situation that I was in that was so finding the right metaphor. What is it that this is like? Because I felt that if I could name it, I could claim it, and it would be resolved in some way. So I sit in my bedroom with 3 dictionaries around me, and I would read one word after another and follow a trail and follow a trail and follow a trail to try on this word or that word, this metaphor or that metaphor. And it was a quest that I enjoyed. And if I got it right, and by right, it meant that it was right for me. It was so satisfying. And I would read that, I would speak that poem to myself over and over and over again, because it was right. It was a truth. So other than being on a quest for understanding, it was a process of curiosity, and it was a process of joy. So,
I very much don't want to have the last word here, so if I say anything, I'll insist that someone else finish up. In the pieces that I have in this show, which was not something I set out to do from the beginning, but we decided that everyone who participated in the workshop ought to have the opportunity to have something of theirs reflected here in the gallery. I made two drawings, one a self-portrait and one a view from the room that we were in down into the courtyard that has the fountain, which isn't really the fountain that Fountain House is named after, but we can pretend. And in each of these, I had started out trying to draw and finding that I drew what I thought something ought to be rather than what it was. The drawings came out lumpy and lopsided and not satisfying to me. Then I remembered something that my mother had told me. She's a little bit of a painter, something that she had learned when I was a child, that if you draw something upside down, you draw what you see instead of what you think it ought to be. And if I might abstract from that something worth learning in this work, it's that out of beginning with what you actually see, you have the opportunity to make an interpretation, make a representation that's something interesting, something worth saying, something that might communicate to someone else. And that first step actually requires not seeing what you think, not doing what you think you see, but giving yourself a little bit of distance and opportunity to see it differently. And to go back to my feeling of uncertainty about whether I had anything worth drawing in the first place, it was in doing this that I had, certainly a lot of enjoyment in the drawing. And I think the capacity to begin to see something in each of those pictures that I had never paid attention to before.
If no one else here has any remarks, we're about at time. So I want to thank everyone for coming. Thank you. Rachel's signaling something. I don't know what.
I was gonna say a brief.
Okay, yeah, one more.
It's like half a sentence. No, I was just gonna say, if you ever have the chance to, as I am so glad I did to go by Clubhouse. It's really, I forget who was saying earlier, an amazing place. It's the sheer scale and everything is really incredible. And even going was inspirational for further reflection, I would say.
and if you have not been to the exhibit at the American Folk Art Museum, the work is extraordinary. There's such a variety of media and styles, and to see work that a person who had only that to focus on for a day or a week or a year or two, the detail and the caliber, I can't even give words to it. It's quite remarkable. It also has the history and a tour that Eric would give, but it's just amazing. So I highly recommend that.
Yes, it closes very soon.
And if you are, it seems you are interested in matters of mind and art, our next show is called Inside Mind, and it's opening on September 12. So please come. Thank you.